Hello and welcome to another Pharaoh stream this late lunch, and we're going to be looking at Interwar art at the Royal Academy in 1933. First of all, thank you very much everyone who's been tuning in. I will say that the last episode got flagged up as an 18 plus stream for its explicit content. I think it was the Fleetwood Walker nude that pushed it over the edge. Anyway, so make sure you try and access that directly, and apologies if you can't do that. It's down to the algorithm gods, sadly. Right, well, I've got another hour to take you through the next year. We've really gone a long way now. We're getting close to the end. 1933, another, in my opinion, great year. I think that 32 for me was one of my favorite years, but this got some quite nice stuff. Let's start off by taking a look, and we're going to kick off with a Sidney Lee. This is called The Widow. Kind of interesting. I included this just for the novelty more than anything else. Sidney Lee, one of our premier landscape artists, printmaker. I mean, I was looking around Sidney Lee after the last stream a little bit, and interestingly, he is known more now for his prints than his paintings, but I think his paintings are really superb. I think way better than his prints, but I think because he's very influential in the print world, there's a lot of people talking about him there. So I think, his painting's kind of underrated. What do we see here? Well, we see a woman. I mean, this is very Harold Knight, isn't it? The voyeur, the Vermeer voyeur here. And she's kind of looking off into the distance, leaning up against the side. Now you can tell she's in this beautiful, maybe medieval or arts and crafts house with the kind of various stained glass roundels in the windows. And on the table, we can see various objets d'art. But for me, the most mysterious thing is the thing in the center, which to me looks like a diorama or something like that. I wasn't able to find out information about who the actual widow is, but I wonder if she's the widow of a famous artist, maybe a theatre stage designer, something like that. And that is kind of like a last little legacy of his work. So it's interesting because it is that kind of Vermeerian kind of look into someone else's world, but also it's a memorial. It's kind of there is this kind of melancholy in the air, and I think, but also a kind of a happiness. I think Lee's managed to really capture those kind of like bittersweet moments of remembrance. You know, the moment of death and passing is always a tragic one. But in the weeks following, I think you end up in this place of remembrance, like I said, kind of always navigating back and winding back to moments you've had together. And I think that maybe she's just having one of those moments. She's sitting in the sun here. She's just come in from outside. Her eyes are closed and she's thinking back to the first time that she met her husband, or a wonderful moment she had with him. And you can see on her expression, there's a tranquility to her face, but also the sadness in the body language at the same time. So kind of bittersweet. But I thought this was really nicely done for Sidney Lee. Obviously not his bread and butter. I mean, there's elements of the landscape to it. You can see obviously the kind of tree in the background. Okay, hold on a second, the door's gone. Sorry about that. That's the professional quality you get with my streams. There's landscape quality in terms of the background and this kind of interesting thing in the center. But I mean, Lee as a landscape artist is more like a constable, which is he's trying to show life and humanity interacting with nature as much as nature itself. So I think it's not that far out of his wheelhouse. Okay, we're on to the next piece here, and this is a John Lavery, and this is Healer. Hey, I'm going to say this is unfortunately Irish names. I want to apologise to the Irish community for my butchering. But this was another powerful woman, and again, I thought he's got a great pose here. So we've seen a lot like this kind of big shift towards informality, the kind of casual recline. I'm thinking, it's interesting. I think Dixie is actually very influential because of that, because he has so many kind of seated, relaxed figures, even though he stylistically sits within the Victorian Edwardian paradigm. But I wonder if Lavery's taking a page out of Spencer Watson's book from the previous year, where we had Cynthia leaning up against the arm of the sofa, and Lavery's put Healer on. I'm going to say Healer on the chair, but her legs are turned off at 90 degrees. Her body's twisted around, and she's leaning on the back. Kind of an awkward pose, really, but there's a funness and a playfulness to it. He's got her also kind of partly disrobed. Again, there's an awkwardness to it. She's wearing this kind of coat or petticoat and like a bolero, some kind of like fur on her back, but the fur's falling off her arm. So you get this impression of she's just arrived back from being out in the town, and she's dropped. She just flung the coat off her shoulder, but then she's turned around and looking directly at us, or just to the left of us, I should say. And it's very confrontational, but also there's something intriguing about it. We're sort of, I think this is more voyeuristic than interactive in terms of the portrait itself. We're seeing a moment unfurling in a stately home, something like that. She sat down, she's looking at someone who's just come through the door. Really love it. Love her facial expression. Again, this is what I'm saying. We're really into Lavery's great years right now, I would say. The handwork's quite nice. We've got the one on the left, particularly good. I feel like the right hand's a little bit clumsy, just in terms of it doesn't feel like it has purpose in the same kind of way. But again, there's a bit of vulnerability there. So I would say that you've got this kind of strong female, but tempered at the same time. Pretty nice from Lavery there. Okay, we've got another Julius Olson. We haven't seen him for a little while. Veiled Moon, Irish Coast. Olson, for me, he's unbelievably prolific, isn't he? Really, he's knocking out 2 to 3 of these every single year. But I think my big criticism of him is he neither really changes his style or his subject. He's just interested in doing exactly the same thing for a span of 20 years. I mean, you have to respect that in some regards, I think. But for me, he ends up being a little bit too samey. That being said, I've seen quite a lot of his paintings up for auction recently, and interestingly, he is increasing in value. So I'd just like to say that I kind of scouted him out first, people. But there is more variation than you might see from these pictures, because a lot of it comes in the color and the subject matter. Although all of his submissions to the RA are very similar, I would say there's a greater breadth outside of that. So I don't know. I still think it's a very fine impressionistic landscape and a decent painting. But I think by his own standards and by the increasing quality of the time, I think he's kind of average, really. Okay, let's go to a Gerald Brockhurst. I'm trying to think if we've had a Brockhurst before, but I don't. I think we have had. Oh, we had the chap, didn't we? The sort of sulking guy. and he's great. But I think we're about to see Brockhurst's like great period, really, which is the female portraits. Once again, if you remember his previous work, it's dark. It's about jewel tones, but also in terms of the figures themselves, he sort of suspends them in these ethereal dark shadow landscapes, and places kind of panic and fear in their eyes. I think there's something just so dark to Brockhurst's work, but so instantly captivating at the same time. And this is direct here. So a young girl, not a society lady, but still probably middling sort. I believe that Brockhurst kind of like the portraiture saved his career, but he eventually moves out to America following the war, basically to kind of chase money, really. And what's there to say about this? I think you can see the sitter is kind of standing up. She's looking almost directly at us. What does her face show? I think there is a sadness, again, a bit of melancholy, but also maybe a bit of trepidation. It's not necessarily, it's equal parts fear and sadness, I think. I really love the color landscape here. Yes, it's mainly blacks going to like a dirty yellow, but then we've got the kind of blue and red matrix for kind of hits of color. And then I think the neck scarf or a shawl or whatever you want to call it is in particularly like masterfully done here. There's so much kind of character and emphasis. You can just really feel the texture, but also kind of color-wise, just totally fits in the landscape. Brockhurst's skin tones are just almost sickly. You know, it's almost kind of like green. That gives it that kind of unnerving tone to it. You know, you can see there's kind of greens and like off yellows in it, but very evocative at the same time. There's something kind of Renaissance about it at the same time. Della Francesca springs to mind, but he's kind of recontextualized it in this modernist landscape at the background, which again is kind of really interesting. And I believe he was like a landscape mythic painter before he did some of the stuff, is my understanding. But yeah, I really like this. Big Brockhurst fan, and I think it really stands out as brilliantly of the time and very interesting as well. Speaking of Brockhurst, we have his Adolescence. Now, this is like what I would describe as a real print nerd's print. This is called Adolescence, and it's an etching. But I would say this is probably one of the most expensive modern etchings to buy. So, for example, if you're looking at like a Sidney Lee print, something like that, maybe like a couple of grand. Frank Short would be like 4,000 for his more famous works that we've covered. This Brockhurst Adolescence goes for like 20,000, 30,000 in the current age. Why is it so expensive? Well, because this is a masterwork of the print format. I mean, this is what I'm saying. It's kind of like a print nerd's print, because you need to understand the process you have to go through to create something like this. And I think people would look at it and say, "Oh, this is an oil painting, or some other kind of printing rather than a print." And that's this is the reason why it's so masterful, is that it is almost disguised. Its value is disguised because it goes beyond its format. It's very, very powerful in terms of its technique. So just from a technical perspective, I think this is probably one of the greatest works, of the greatest print works of the 20th century, for sure. Then the actual picture itself is very interesting. It's called Adolescence. So again, it's about the kind of the young girl, and essentially it's a nude, but with a bit more depth to it than that. We can see the woman from the back on the right hand side across here. That's the first thing we should be really looking at. And I have to say, this is one of the most beautiful renderings of a young girl, like ever, let alone in print. I think it just really captures the kind of beauty of womanhood and youth. And you can see that she's got some tea on the side there. She's got her combs out, but she's just taken off her slip. She decided this is the moment to kind of look at herself, to admire herself, to wonder and question about herself. Now, the real piece of mastery here, I think, is actually with a mirror, because you can see it slightly tilted forward. This is an old, like, Deco style stand. You've got a couple of mirrors either side, and this one, it tilts around an x-axis at the middle across here. And she's tilted it down to look at herself, but specifically not to look at her face, which is what it's meant to use for, but to look at her body. And this is a young woman inspecting herself in womanliness to see how she's growing, So it's a very frank, intimate moment, a moment of mystery, of understanding, of discovering oneself. And you can see, look at her left hand across there. She's kind of gripping the fabric slightly. She's having she's like having a moment of like existential crisis, I think, or something like that, and is desperately holding on to the fabric. But also maybe it's nervousness and excitement at the same time. Now, but the effect of the mirror tilting down, in my opinion, is it's not like a straight shot, as it were, because when you tilt the mirror up, you start to get foreshortening on the picture, and that's why I think the central character here does not look as beautiful as her back. That it's kind of been squished down because the mirror has been tilted, and so it gives this slightly warped quality to it, to her face, to her body. And I wonder whether that kind of a slightly uncanniness is something that Brockhurst has purposely done. He's chosen to create this moment of unsettling reality. And again, we're sort of almost looking at the woman through the woman's eyes, or the young girl through the young girl's eyes as well. So anyway, this is, again, one of my favorites. Like I said, one of the great prints of the 20th century here, Brockhurst. Okay, more nudes. This is definitely going to get age restricted again. I'm sorry. Lara Knight here with Dawn, and Dawn has been covered. Like, Dawn is like one of the great symbols of the interwar period, just in the art. Again, if we're kind of, I think when we're doing an exercise like this, it's just worth thinking about the kind of whatever the cheesy way of saying it is the zeitgeist. What is the feelings or movements within the group of people at this time, and the new Dawn is definitely something. Now, Dawn has been covered by several sculptors and a few painters. I think we had Proctor doing one, or something similar to that, the allegorical. This again is it is simultaneously a setup for a nude, which is, again, Lara Knight's bread and butter, but also there is some kind of symbolic allegorical elements to it as well. We're given two figures to see, and they're both half disrobed, one with dark hair, one with blonde hair, one slightly younger than the other. And I cannot help but think that the one on the left represents something like night. We've seen this with Proctor. Proctor had the double as well, but on the other end, what was it? Dusk and night. But I think this is night giving way to young Dawn at the front. She's younger, symbolizing the newness of it, but she's got that kind of golden hair representing the sun. This structurally is kind of a little bit like Sea Sprite, like we saw last time, but much less heavy-handed it's almost a bit more like a Surratt pointillism, I think. You can see here with the details on the brush strokes down at the bottom across here. She's placing lots of small little individual ones, and the paint texture is like more middling than last time. Again, I think this is great. We're seeing a really wonderful period with Lara. The beauty described is really excellent, especially I think again the arm work across here is just so wonderful. I like the kind of allegorical nature of it, and again I think really captured the kind of the nascent dawn there. She's a little bit gawky. Look how confident Night is. She's got both her hands behind her back. That's such a great powerful pose for a woman, while Dawn's a little bit slumped forward, her shoulders forward. There's a little bit gawky, a little bit nervous, but she's the future at the same time. So I think that's what Laura's trying to tell us. Okay, on to more nude allegory here, and we've got Russell Flint with his version of Spring. Now again, one of kind of Flint's classic motif is a series of girls partially nude, either in the classical or in the allegorical form, and what we're seeing here is the allegorical spring bursting forth. I have to say that the quality of the picture again was not great, so I would have loved this in a higher resolution, but at least you can get an idea of the picture here. We see two women kind of looking on at spring. She is confident. Look how light she is on her feet. She's kind of lifting up, maybe even dancing, delicately holding a cloth in her hand. And as she's waving it around, we can start to see some kind of fresh flowers coming from. So, it's simultaneously a notion of an allegory, but also maybe it's a celebration of spring. These girls have gone and collected the springtime flowers. But the girl on the right herself also represents spring. I wonder whether there are allusions to I've forgotten her name now. Whatever. The daughter of Ceres who got stuck in with Pluto. I've totally forgotten. This is terrible. Anyway, there's the story of Spring, Persephone. There we go. Persephone basically got stolen by Pluto, and she ate of a single pomegranate seed, and then because of that, she has to stay in the underworld for half of the year. And I wonder if there's a bit of an allusion to that through this kind of cave across here, and it's almost like she's kind of stepped out of the cave. And it's time for spring to arrive. And I think based on the fact that Russell Flint does go to the classical mode quite often, I think that is the kind of the undertone to that. I mean, there's a couple of other three interesting things I'll say, and I'll move on. Firstly, I have no idea what this thing is on the right-hand side. It looks like a flaming torch or something like that. Very interesting, mysterious. Secondly, this is actually, I think, really one of his great works, in my opinion, because there's lots of interesting landscape going on, and the colors are really interesting. It's obviously such like a brown painting, but not your the masters of brown are obviously Rembrandt and the other Dutch masters, but their browns are much deeper, much more red toned. There's almost like a yellowness, this like yellow brown in this painting, giving it this very light earthy feel. And then I love these kind of like almost minty greens in the fabrics, etc. Really interesting, really nice. I think very powerful piece, and I like the allegory, and I think this is a really good example from what Russell Flint's able to do, and very nice. Right, and another excellent work here, in my opinion, and this is from Spencer Watson. So good to have him back doing what he does best, which is allegory and mythic. Once again, the birth of Venus. The Venus is definitely, it's the Venusian age, the interwar period. Now, I would say that Watteau has decided to go for a more kind of classical approach to Venus. I mean, who's done one? We saw Phil Potts last year, so again, maybe this is him kind of taking on Phil Pot. But I think Macmillan did the statue. We've seen like several versions. Alfred Turner. This is kind of like classic Birth of Venus. She's arriving on the shell with revelers, right? Who's she arriving with Cupid? And then she's kind of being dragged along by some kind of sea god, maybe even Poseidon himself. And then on the left are two sea sprites riding dolphins. Well, a couple of things that's interesting. Firstly, on the left-hand side, you can see these deep, dark clouds, and there's so much rain happening. But actually, as you can see the direction of travelers from right to left, and as she moves from right to left, the deep cloud makes way to the most wonderful sunshine, and you can see this beautiful rainbow in the sky, signaling that the good times are here. Love has arrived for all. Let's talk about Venus herself. I think this is again this is classic Spencer Watson with this. Again, sorry to be crass, but this kind of like bitchy resting face women. We saw this with Eve. One of the most bitchiest, greatest Eves of all time, I think, is totally brilliant. It's kind of it's almost a snarl at the same time. Such great self-confidence here. Just like compare this to Alfred Turner's Venus or the Macmillan Venus, which are they're both kind of like nascent and just in the midst of becoming. Watson's Venus has become, and she knows her power and her strength and is flaunting it, and she's also sneering at you. She knows she's beautiful, and you are nothing to her at the same time. And I think it's one of my favorite Venuses of all time. Brilliant. Very extreme contrapposto. It's almost kind of absurd. You can see here that she's putting all of her weight on this leg, but because of the seashell, the other leg's raised up a little bit. I love the Cupid as well. I think Cupid's so hard to draw. I think any Cupid as Pooty, anyone knows my anti-Pooty action. It's one of my least favorite things. By Pooty, I mean like little baby fat chubby cheeks with wings. Absolutely hate that. Cupid as this little adolescent boy is great. I also like how he's kind of like mirroring his mother's pose a little bit. You can see the contrapposto there, and the most wonderful Venetian red wings. I think that's just totally and utterly brilliant. Love these little cheeky seagulls flying alongside. You know, you get this idea that it's a real moment of celebration and joy, like a procession, a true procession into reality and into the world. I think the worst part is maybe the face on on the old sea god down here. It's a little bit gawky, but still brilliant. I absolutely love this. Is definitely one of Spencer Watson's greatest pictures, and I like the Nereids as well. They're kind of a little bit manneristic. They're a little bit kind of elfine as well. They're purposely done in a way so they don't necessarily look human, I think. Really nice. Good to see him back. Right, away from fanciful mythic symbolism and into reality, and this is L.M. Glasson's The Four. Let me just bring up. Glasson's a new artist. He featured in a couple of other years, but didn't quite make the cut. I remember. Born in Twickenham, attended at Marlborough, but then ended up at the RA. But he's definitely one of the younger guys because he's heavily involved during the Second World War with the camouflage work. Also a member of the art clubs and art workers guild from 1933. So that's of course basically the kind of throw over from the arts and crafts guys, basically art workers guild. I've been there. It's a very, very wonderful building. one of the greatest portrait rooms in London. But we've got this kind of classic 1930s feel to it. But okay, I would almost put this down as like French Impressionism meets 1930s realism plus a little bit of that sculptural modernism thrown in. So by the French Impressionism, I mean any boating theme, you're instantly thinking about some of the great French artists. The kind of it's people with boats. You're immediately drawn into it. This is a bit of kind of realism in the sense that this is kind of 4 women. They're part of a yachting club, clearly, and then maybe I would say in Putney, the Putney boat sheds. Up early in the morning, you can see it's almost nighttime. There are people still row on the Thames. There was a rowing society at uni. I was at uni in London, and they would go to Putney for their boating, but you'd have to get there very early, so I never managed to make it. So you can see it's very early in the morning, and actually Glasson's sort of ground the background into this like large black line almost, with a few of the houses highlighted across here. We can see the boat in the background and the Thames looking exceptionally clean. See, this is already, you can tell this is a fantasy. So there is this realist element, but I think it's kind of been lifted up a little bit by some of the poses, and one immediately thinks of, again, Quattrocentro, maybe even some classical works here. Let's just look at the poses. You've got things like this woman across here. She's in contrapposto. She's inspecting the oar. I mean, this could be straight out of like a classical pose. Change this oar for a spear, and then this guy for a classical mode. Same thing with this woman on the right hand side. This is Franz Hals, that confident arm on the hip, leaning up against the oar across here. Totally brilliant pose. So everything, yes, there is a realness to it, but it's been elevated, it's been staged to kind of create these little vignettes and scenes and moments. And then I think the rendering is really nice as well. A little bit Tamara de Lampica for my liking, if I'm honest with you, but still really fun. And I thought definitely something of interest there. Okay, I often talk about how in the background of all of these, for every one painting I put in here, there's about 10 others that don't make the cut, and this is very much the kind of thing that doesn't make it what I would describe as not. We don't want to be too down on any artwork that is worth that certainly made it in the RA before the Second World War is worthy of inspection. So I want to give credit where credit is due, but I think a lot of it is very similar. It serves a purpose. It's more functional than I would say the true purpose of art, which is to show the imaginary world, the unknown world, and to be soothsayer and prophet for a nation in visual work. But the occasional one does slip through, and I quite like throwing them in. And here we've got Oswald Burley, who we have actually, he's done a few things in the past. And this is old Neville Chamberlain, old Nev, famous for his little piece of paper from Hitler that he will receive in less than 7 years. We actually saw his brother, the other Chamberlain, dressed in his finery. And this is Nev in his kind of Edwardian cut suit. I don't know. I think there is a real. It's difficult because two things. Number one, we basically the average Englishman doesn't really know that much about Neville outside of his role at the beginning of the war, and secondly, the only thing we've seen about him is his kind of speech once he's received his paper from Munich. Where he does look a bit weirdly because he's a little bit older and a bit stressed out. Well, I think this portrait puts him in a very flattering light. Looks very confident, very able. Yes, he's old, but there's a kind of a wisdom in his eyes. Leaning on the dispatch box again, you can see all his papers behind him. I think this is brilliant. This is one of my favorite prime ministerial paintings that we've seen. I love his left hand as well, kind of almost playing with his fingers, or maybe he's got something in his hand at the same time. You know, there's a casuality and a confidence to him that's totally brilliant. So really fun, and you know, doing a little bit to rehabilitate old Nev there. Okay, we're on to Philpott and the Three Fates. Now, I mentioned last time that Philpott was taking a move towards somewhere new. Well, what was his influences? Well, again, like I keep going about, the surrealists are becoming increasingly important and capturing the attention of many more people. And I feel like partly because of that, he's sort of forced to kind of push himself. Now, the last painting we saw, which was the like Aphrodite arriving, I thought was like one of his worst paintings of all time. I absolutely hate it. This is much more interesting to me. This is kind of like more of his new style. But what he's done here is chosen again the classical mode, but or the classical motifs in a surrealist landscape at the same time. So who do we have? The Three Fates, famously three women, and they would control the fates of men. They had the thread of fate, but between them they only had one eye. And what we can see here is on the left hand side, the woman on the left, she's got the thread of fate, which is in orange. The one in the middle is not only holding what we can presume to be is their quote unquote eye, but she's also got like a large crystal ball that's on her feet. And on the far right, you can see the third figure. Now there, you can tell they're blind because there's no eyes in their sockets, so there's that kind of hauntingness to them, and all of their arms are kind of wrapped around or holding each other, so they know where their sisters are. They're all in a state of undress, but at different levels. Interestingly, Philpott's a couple of things here. I feel like influence-wise, just from a form perspective, this is actually like quite Rembrandty almost. Look how fleshy the stomachs are, and the kind of sagging breasts on the left-hand side. I mean, he's chosen a very, I say Rembrandt, I meant Rubens-esque model, in my opinion. But the faces, to me, very much are like African. We've seen Philpott as very intrigued by both African art, but also the African figure. And I'm pretty sure he's used 3 black models for this painting. There's an element of Reed Dick on the right hand side. That's what I think. You know, the kind of mourning figure with repeated lines all at the same period. So I think there's something very sculptural about it, and we see that with the colors as well, having it almost as this gris, the gris style painting in like a Mantegna. Although that's been shot by the eye and the thread in orange, these kind of super bright colors. The 3 figures I think are really intriguing and interesting. And what he's done is, I think in his last work, why I hated it so much was there was just a lot of sloppy painting, a lot of lazy painting in the last piece, masquerading as abstract art. While with this, you can see, look at the middle hand. I think is exquisite. You know, the detail across here is just brilliant. And again, with the dresses and outfits here, yes, they're kind of relatively lightly done, but it's just pure skill and technique at the same time. He doesn't need to do too much with the brush, giving it that kind of more modern feeling, but at the same time, perfectly done. Where has he placed them? He's almost put them in like a futurist landscape, I think. Maybe more futurist than surrealist, I should really say, because it's about large blocks of color, lines emanating out. You can see these lines either side, almost to me evoke an hourglass or something like that. And also there's kind of little dots in the sky here, very mysterious. This line, it could be a sail of a ship, it could be part of a moon, it could be nothing at all. But I think that works for the Fates, because they're known as the Grey Ladies as well. You know, they are, and they're physically grey in this time. They are the Fates, I think, because they're more powerful than the gods themselves, are sort of kind of like meta gods. So they should exist even further outside. They're even more foreign to us and to reality. So I think this setting, in my opinion, is perfect for that. And I think, as much as I do love, I think Philpott's symbolic work is still his greatest period. I find this to be a very satisfying portrait and a very interesting attempt to take extreme forms of modernism and rehabilitate them with kind of classical thought and modes at the same time. Okay, here is another one. This is Man and the Fates. This is more like his kind of sloppy, how should I say, the Venus one from last time. And what we're seeing here is like man represented by this hero, and he's got Pegasus across there. I'm pretty sure that what's his name? Perseus. Is it Perseus? Spoke to the Fates. This time he's got the Fates almost as kind of three stone statues leaning against the wall. This again feels more like a De Chirico. You've got this interesting forced perspective. Yes, the horizon line's there, but the perspective lines are flying off across to the side, so it gives us a bit of a strange feeling. And you can see how the feet and the items on the floor are kind of tilted towards us. I really like what he's done again with the Pegasus. I wonder if he's taken something from Proctor from last year, and then this last the heroic figure across here is kind of interesting. You know, his arms up in a position that is somewhat like the Roman salute. Some would say that. I would not say that. He's kind of gazing off in the distance, even though he's visiting the Fates, he can't see anything. And he's holding this fantastic shield, which has just been reduced to an almost like a crystal lozenge, like a large jewel that's been plucked from a giant's crown. The Fates are kind of interestingly rendered here. I think less African and more kind of classic, but they have a kind of a stone-like quality to them. This time they've all got eyes. I like particularly the madden expression on the left-hand side here. This is something from Fuselier or some of the academic romantics, and each of them hold the thread. It kind of goes along their body and then down across here into the actual sea, the sands of time itself. Really interesting, I think. Very, very intriguing. Again, still, I mean, I prefer the other. This is my preference for his direction over this, in my opinion, but this is still way better than the Venus from last year. So interesting, and also some of the most radical paintings we've seen at the Royal Academy ever. Okay, we've got this one from Mary Adshead. This is London Evening. Let me tell you about Mary. Artist, decorator, and painter. Studied at the Slade. Unsurprisingly, like Slade is where to go for more of like edgy yet accepted, is what I would say. Did a couple of underground posters as well, so that's kind of cool. I mean, this piece is called London Evening. It is like modernism, like specifically 1910s English modernism meets realism meets like Deco I mean, Stanley Spencer's around at the time, but it's kind of like Spencer-esque, isn't it? Really. What do we see? Well, we see almost like a vignette of scenes all around London. If we look in the back, we can see like a bandstand with people sitting down to listen to music. You know, maybe this is down near Battersea, the Battersea bandstand. And as we get a bit closer, we can see that's part of a park across here, and some children are feeding the animals, and the young boy's got his wicket and bat, and they've had a day out together, and you can see this kind of family looking on across there. As we get closer, we see a couple of men lying down in the grass, just having a break, reading the newspaper in a wonderful summer's day. As we move closer, we see two officers taking their bows out for a walk, and who have they encountered? A London hawker selling flowers and other beautiful things, and they've both decided to buy some flowers for their bows. On the left-hand side, we see this kind of grand hotel with this kind of crusty old gentleman taking these beautiful young women to them, and this old man here looking down on the balcony as his almost operatic wife looks over. On the right-hand side, we see the other part of London, the darker side here, and a series of flats. A cat sits on the shelf across here, but it's this woman looks out with an air of melancholy and ennui, almost turning away from London. So there's a couple of interesting things about this, in my opinion. Firstly, just in terms of its rendering, you can see this is very inspired by like post-impressionism. Cézanne's flattening of perspectives, these little vignettes and scenes. It's not even the flattening of perspective, but again, like look at the balcony here, it's been twisted around so we can see everything. There's allusions to this like class discussion here as well. Again, this is kind of the beginning of the end. This is the activist art. Here we go. This is about the rich and the poor as well, but also about shared society. This is kind of like true realism, trying to show everything about life. And then in terms of the rendering, it has that kind of very deco-y style, like very more like the French style, if I'm honest with you, very Dupas, if I'm honest with you, more than the English style. Very, very interesting piece. I'm not too much of a fan, if I'm honest with you, but it really stood out as, again, quite a daring piece for the RA. Okay, on to the next piece, and again, we're going back to the kind of classic motif of the Golden Apple. Again, this time by H.A. Budd. We can see Paris in his shepherd's hat, and Mercury's next to him, and he's giving him the golden apple, and he has to decide who's the most beautiful. And we've got Aphrodite at the front here, Athena in the middle, and again Hera skulking around at the back. So there's this interesting kind of procession, kind of movement going on with some of the forms. It's kind of interesting. I quite like the Athena figure here. I think that's a good pose. I think some other people do it better, but again, this is definitely kind of interesting from my perspective. Okay, let's move on to some sculpture, and we've got another Charles Wheeler. Wheeler he's a young man. He's getting noticed more and more. He's going to be one of the most significant sculptors of the next 10 years, basically, being very involved with the Royal Academy, but also the Royal British Society of Sculptors as well. He's kind of like society's man. This is mother and child. So again, you've got thematically, this is straight out of Mestrovich. This is Mestrovich, but it's also Reed Dick. But actually, Wheeler's sculpting more in the Macmillan style of direct stone plus interesting kind of Romanesque, Gothic, like early Gothic style sculpture at the same time. Let's talk about the child first. I mean, there's definitely allusions to the Madonna and child, because you can see the child with his arms out, almost like a cross here. The mother sits with one leg up. Notice the flattening of the feet down here. Notice these are truly wonderful wrinkle lines from the fabric, which have been sort of turned into kind of dramatic sweeping curves. She kind of looks off into the distance, head tilted, and you can see this kind of abstracted, repeated hair. Definitely looking to Bourdelle here as well. This is again kind of like, it's like if Bourdelle was a bit tighter in terms of his sculptural style, you get this Wheeler. I think very, very, very fetching, very nice. I think Macmillan's doing more interesting things still, but Wheeler's still a young man, so this is still a great work for someone of his age, I think. Okay, we've got Winfried Turner and Thought here. So Alfred Turner is one of the sculptors we've seen come up time and time again. He has a daughter who is also a sculptor, and this is one of Winifred's work. She's kind of operating very much in the similar mode to her father and takes on a lot of his pieces stylistically, maybe a little bit more realist, but this is really good still. I thought this was a nice piece. It's called Thought. Again, this kind of shows the woman's touch. Any man, like think about Rodin's thinker, it's a man. Think about any time a male sculptor does thinking, it's a man. The woman has sculpted Thought as a woman there, so it's a good little bit something different compared to what a male might do. I would say that she has a lot more realism than her father. Look at the hands, for example. This is almost academic. But then the torso, the head, the stylism around the body is definitely more of her father's. I mean, she sits within his group, but doesn't stray too far at the same time. Would I say it's better than her father's? I mean, they're both trying to do very different things. Turner Senior is trying to explore fragility and quietness and softness, I think, as opposed to this, which is actually much more rigid and strong, in my opinion. Anyway, Wilfred Turner is definitely one of the better female sculptors. Okay, we've got this Richard Garb here, and this is Wind in the Trees. This is one of his ceramic works. One thing that's interesting about Garb is that he gets heavily involved with the Royal Doulton and the wave of pottery that happens. You know how, again, this is probably like a millennial thing. Millennials growing up must know this as well, but nanas used to love pottery figures. My gran had about 10 of these, and they're mainly horrific, clowns and the like, etc. That desire for kind of pottery comes out of the 30s, I'm pretty sure, where Doulton were producing a lot of these kind of figures for the home. This is kind of like mass art for the home. But I would say that the kind of figures that my grandmother used to have is much more base than this wonderful piece here from Richard Garb, Wind in the Trees. And this is an allegorical work again. Wind being represented by this beautiful woman. She is, her legs are bent, she's kind of flying across into the sky, but she's not flying straight. She's almost heading up into the sun, but her eyes are being blinded by the brightness of the sky. And you can see the trees below show her size, where the trees have been kind of dwarfed down into these tiny inch-high little vegetarians, little bits of broccoli, which have been bent over by her. But she's unmoved by the trees. She's showing her power and strength. This definitely fits in keeping with the last piece, with Macmillan's piece, the Night from last year, where again you've got that kind of forced scale through size, which I really like. But I think this is really lovely. One thing you miss with ceramic work is because the way that it works is you would normally sculpt it, turn it into a clay mold, you'd bisque it, which means you fire it first, giving it some strength, but it would also create pores, allowing you to glaze it. But during the glazing, you're adding about 1 or 2 mils worth of material. So even though the glazing is glass or an oxide, it creates a bit of fatness to the figure, let's just say. So a lot of that detail kind of gets lost, but he's used this very translucent glass so you can still see a glaze, so you can still see the depth of color. And there's a nice color change as well, giving that kind of lightness and freshness. For me, the one of the best pieces of the Interwar is this piece by William Macmillan called "Morning." It's a female nude. It's not as let's say kind of medieval modernist as his typical fare. Normally, he goes for a much more manneristic mode. These kind of like stylized. This is quite realist for him still, but not too much. Again, we've got the allegorical figure of Morning in Portland stone. There is just so much confidence and vivaciousness in this pose. It just blows my mind. Look at the kind of shoulder peeking up even beyond her body. Look at the left hand kind of just casually left down across there. Her head tilted back, looking directly at us. She knows who she is. This sort of reminds me a little bit of Watson's Venus that we saw a while ago. Total confidence, total beauty. I think this is sculpted so nicely. Maybe the hand across here is a little bit janky, but I think totally brilliant piece. Absolutely love it. I've tried to find out where this is. No idea. So if anyone has seen this in any art gallery, please do tell me. But I absolutely adore this. I think this is one of Macmillan's best pieces and one of the best Interwar sculptures that we've seen to date. There's not much more I can really say to it. It's a very simple piece. It really is just an allegorical nude sculpture, but it's the pose, it's the form, it's the strength and the character that just speaks through the page and directly to us and sums up the true beauties of womanhood. Okay, we're going from like one side of the scale to the other. This is Reed Dick for the Our Lady of Liverpool, Queen of the Seas. Now, I actually first heard about this through an auction house years ago. This piece went up for sale, and I didn't win it, annoyingly. But this was a design for the cathedral of in Liverpool, and I would say that cathedral was going to be, I would say, one of the most significant artistic achievements of the century. However, the war scuppered it. The money ran out for the project. They'd involved lots and lots of different architects and important artists who were going to contribute to it, and it just didn't pan out. I think it's maybe next to Philpott, one of the great tragedies of the 20th century, in my opinion. This is Reed Dick's attempt at creating Queen of the Seas, this beautiful, really Gothic figure. It's in plaster, so again, I'm sorry about the quality, but you can see that it's a woman holding an orb with a bird on top on this kind of seashell. So, I mean, when you're thinking about a seashell, you're thinking of Venus, but this is kind of like the Gothic Venus all wrapped up. The form of this is just totally brilliant. Very tall, very slender. There's nothing that you initially feel from the female form, but you get a sense of length, a sense of elegance. Look at the beautiful face that she has, the tall, long neck, the bejeweled nature of her. Her right hand, interestingly, out again. I think it lost a couple of fingers because it was listed as a wax, but I wonder whether it was a painted plaster. And you can see here the kind of bird wonderfully rendered. Like Reed Dick does some great birds. I just absolutely love it. At the base with this kind of like simple zigzag motif. Really interesting piece. Out of nowhere, Reed Dick creates one of the greatest Gothic works of the 20th century. Love it. Okay, and now we're on to another brilliant piece of sculpture. This by Gilbert Ledward. Gilbert's sort of like known for some of the more abstract war memorials. This is Ceres, this is the Queen of Fecundity and the Harvest, and Persephone's mother. And you can see here her cornucopia. She's sitting next to the fruits of her godhood. One arm kind of sitting down, holding it together, while the other stretched out on her head, but her head is kind of mingling with these leaves in this. Could it be a lemon tree, something like that? And you can see the flowers. Maybe it's just like maybe it's not a lemon tree. It's some kind of other flowering bush, and the bush is flowering before her. Her body's tilted towards us, but her legs are up and to the side. So there's a bit of awkwardness, but it's a very elegant pose. It's almost like some kind of a dance, an embrace, but her eyes are closed. So this is kind of like she's almost asleep as she's doing it. There's an effortlessness to it. You can see with the hair, again, this very medieval modernism kind of stylistic repetition, and the same with the fabric, a bit Reed Dick, but a bit more curvaceous at the same time. Totally brilliant piece. Absolutely love it. I think it's a really great bit of sculpture, although I still feel like morning eclipses it quite significantly, but a very nice piece from Ledwood here. And finally, we've got Alfred Turner. Like, I think it is easy to dismiss Turner because there's just so much. This is a real great age of sculpture. You know, this is some amazing sculptures going on. Again, just genuinely some of the best ever seen in England and or Britain, I should say. But what Turner's trying to do is very different to everyone else. He is kind of like almost alone, both stylistically and thematically. I talked about earlier about when talking about his daughter, that he is representing vulnerability and softness and something very, very different. Like Turner for me is doing something very, very new that's actually never done before. Like, for example, something like The Morning, like the female nude has been done before, and so is the kind of confident nude as well. But what about vulnerability? What about fear or fragility at the same time? Those are the things that Turner's interested in. And you have these just exceedingly delicate, quiet little moments. Yes, they don't like something like Morning is like just stands out. Boom! It's in your face. She's strong, and she knows she's strong, and that's her and that's what's interesting about her. But Turner is kind of so subtle. It's the kind of quiet voice. It is the little hope in Pandora's box right at the end after all of the troubles. And again, I think it just really marks him out as being very, very unique, very, very interesting still. But you have to spend the time just kind of breaking it down, admiring it, just putting your ear out and quietly hearing the whispers of the sculpture. Very interesting piece. This one's called Love and Life. Where is the love? Where is the life? I mean, I would presume that the female is the love. They're clinging onto life. Can you tell the difference between the two? Maybe that's the point. And they're both kind of like looking up into the sky, but holding onto each other. There's a sense of fear, but can they make it together? You know, this is a sculpture talking about fellowship, friendship, survival, and making it through the harsh realities of life. Right, that is it for this week. In my opinion, some great stuff. I'm going to say this again, absolute banger year for me. What were some of my favorites from this year? Let's have a quick look. I mean, yeah, The Adolescence from Brockhurst, Spencer Watson's Birth of Venus was great, and then the Millen Morning and the Reed Dick are just very, very powerful works. So not a huge number, only 21 works this year. Maybe it's just being particularly tight, but I think totally brilliant. So I will say goodbye. Please leave a comment with stuff that you like. Give me your thoughts on it, and I'll catch you all later.